Welcome back to the StockTA Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Stewart. Today, we're spotlighting what might be the single most strategic and vulnerable commodity in the entire defense and industrial supply chain, tungsten. While China controls nearly 80% of global production, the United States currently has zero primary domestic tungsten mining. We're looking at Spartan Metals, ticker W on the TSX Venture and SPRMF in the US. Please note this interview is being disseminated on behalf of Spartan Metals. Spartan controls two massive domestic tungsten assets, the high-grade Eagle Project in Nevada and the bulk tonnage Victorio Project in New Mexico. With an updated PEA landing in early Q4 2026 and drills actively turning right now, Spartan is sprinting to fill North America's supply vacuum. Joining me is Spartan's president and CEO, Brett Marsh. Brett, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
So I think this is a really interesting time with just all the different things going on in the world, whether it's supply chain issues, tariff issues, conflicts in the Middle East. And I think tungsten sits at a really unique spot. And I had the opportunity to meet Brett in person in Florida at a conference back in May, and we really hit it off. And I really like his company, and I'm glad I was finally able to have him come on the show so we could kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive here. So I just wanted to start off with, for my listeners who don't know, what is tungsten and why is it getting so much attention right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. Tungsten is really interesting and unique metal because it has some very interesting and rare properties. It has one of the highest melting points of any element on the periodic table. It's extremely dense and it's extremely resistant to corrosion, radiation, and those types of things. So it's really sought after in a lot of different applications, specifically in military defense, aerospace, but even so much more. It's now being used in semiconductors. It's a foundation for a lot of the artificial intelligence being built out because it has such high heat capacity. And then it also is used in electric vehicles because of the heat thermal capabilities that it possesses. So all that taken together, it's a very sought after element. But one of the biggest things that's happened recently, at least in 2026, is, as you mentioned, China controls roughly 80% of the world's production, and they cut off exports to almost all countries earlier in the year. And so that really upset the supply chains and really shifted the focus for many Western countries to domesticate and really secure the supply chain for many critical metals, with tungsten being, foremost among them because of its sought after properties.
So you mentioned the tariffs, the trade cutoff. There's been a lot of stuff coming from President Trump about ramping up domestic supply chains. And he recently had an executive order about critical defensive minerals and how that impacts the supply chain. So does that have any impact on Spartan Metals? Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
Yeah, absolutely. So before this, really, it was just guidance to defense contractors and kind of encouragement for them to utilize, domestic sources of these metals. But now that this recent executive order has kind of shut that off and is almost forcing them to, secure domestic supply. And so what that means is, because we have two great projects, one in Nevada and one in New Mexico, as you mentioned, we're sitting in a perfect spot to be able to satisfy a lot of those contractors' needs. And so we're basically right at the very beginning of that supply chain. And so that's we're the first.
Well, can we talk a little bit about Victorio? Like, I know there's some massive historical intercepts. A lot of drilling's been done. You guys have a lot of good data. What does that look like? How is that helping you with this PEA? Can you just walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So when we picked up the project, we knew it already had a positive PEA on it that was done in 2008. So and those economics were quite different than what we have today. And so we really needed to establish a foundation for what, could economically be produced from Victorio using, more respectable, or using more current metal prices from molybdenum and tungsten, which are the two chief metals produced there or present there rather at Victorio. And so From an exploration standpoint, there's over 100 drill holes into it already. And as I mentioned, it had a positive PEA. It had one of the largest, or the largest tungsten resource in the United States after a resource update in 2012. And so, with all that taken together, we also noticed some data opportunities as we were going through our due diligence and as we've gone through the PEA process, to where we can potentially increase the size of the deposit and also potentially make it more profitable.
How did that, just the focus on tungsten change? Like, that's such a big project. Why didn't that get built years ago? Like, why did we wait for
Yeah.
China to take basically a stranglehold on that whole supply chain?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because when you look at the deposit, it's basically about a 50-50 mix between tungsten and molybdenum. And molybdenum has held up pretty consistently over the course of the last, 2 decades or so as far as price wise. So it's been very stable. And that's what really makes the project, like break even or make it a go forward type of project. And when we start adding in the tungsten, we start to see that's where a lot of the profit's going to be coming from in the future. Now, the reason why it didn't really advance was because the price of tungsten in 2008 was around $8 a pound. And today it's currently sitting around $3,000 a metric ton unit, and that translates to about $140 a pound or so. So it's a pretty significant difference. And so really for that reason, Victorio has just kind of been waiting for the right time. And I think we've got that right now with the world geopolitical climate and the commodity cycle that we're in.
That's really cool. So you got that going on, and you also have Eagle going on, and you've been exploring that pretty aggressively. You guys have had a lot of news releases out this summer. Can you just give my listeners a little overview of that project?
Yeah, Eagle's a great project. So it's a past producing tungsten district as well. So we've got two large claim blocks. And between the two claim blocks, we've got three past producing tungsten mines. And they're all relatively high grade at over 1% tungsten trioxide. And to put that into a little bit of a context, most tungsten mines around the world, their average grade is about 0.3%. So we're almost 3 times the average grade. And what else makes this exciting for us is everything that we've reported is really near surface or right from surface sampling. So it's very exciting now that we've got the drills turning, and we're going to be able to start defining how deep this actually is and understand how big Eagle could be. And so to have just a little bit of scale at that high of a grade really will equate to a lot of tungsten.
Since it was past producing, how does that look on the permitting front? Does that accelerate things? Do you have to restart from scratch there? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, so it really doesn't do too much with us for us on the permitting standpoint, unless we wanted to like go back inside some of these underground operations that were operating in the 20s, 30s, 40s timeframe, and get underground, and really helps us limit some of our surface disturbance, which is kind of the big thing when you're operating on public lands in the United States. So because the projects themselves are so near surface, I don't really believe that the underground infrastructure gives us too much of a leg up, other than some subsurface knowledge from the past productions. We do have some of the production records and details that kind of tell us, where some of the higher grade tungsten zones are, which will help guide some of our exploration as we begin. But then as we've gone through over the course of the last 18 months or so in our surface exploration programs, we've really defined a very large footprint of both tungsten silver vein mineralization, along with what we have as like a tungsten skarn deposit that kind of rings those veins. So we're really kind of interested and excited about getting the drills on those to potentially develop and define a really large multi-metallic system foundation with a tungsten foundation.
That's really cool. I'm going to share your chart right now. So for my US listeners, this is OTC ticker SPRMF. Our algorithm has them as very bullish in the short term right now. So this is a great time for Brett to come on. They have major support at 40 cents, and this is at yesterday's close. They're just almost 42 cents. So it's 41 and 7/10. So 42 cents. They have medium resistance at 45 and 47. But I like this chart because there's a lot of light resistance above that. And just knowing Brett and talking at the conference, this is a very tightly held company, and there are not a lot of people trying to flip in and out of the stock. So I just want to give Brett a chance to talk about kind of what he sees in the chart and how the share structure is set up.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, the share structure. So right now we've got really strong insider ownership and a strategic partner in Ridgeline Minerals as well, that we're all very aligned in the strategy and the focus of the company to really develop these two projects and advance them as far as we can. And, that really shows as we've all, been net buyers basically for the entire time throughout our capital raises and everything. So it's something that we all believe very strongly in, and really looking forward to seeing things grow.
Nice. So as we wrap up here, between now and year end, what do you think is the biggest fundamental driver for your company?
Well, we're going to have two really, really fantastic drivers, right? So our exploration results that we're going to be delivering here from Eagle, probably starting in about September timeframe and into October, are really going to start to illustrate to the world how special the Eagle project is. And then parallel to that, we're really going to be, putting out the information on the updated PEA for Victorio. So we're going to have really two very strong work streams from which to build upon going into 2027.
I think you guys are a really interesting spot. I mean, to have two tungsten projects with this kind of potential for a company with your market cap is really unique.
Yeah, I think so. I agree, and that's one of the things that has everybody excited and has everybody holding tight to their stock right now. Is we really believe that there's a lot more to be had with our stock, and there's a lot of room for us to run.
So, for my listeners who want to find out more about your company, where can they look you up?
Best places on the internet at spartanmetals.com. And there's all of our past press releases and everything else goes there as well. So and then of course our contact information is there if you've got some more detailed questions and then they want to do a deeper dive on some of the technical stuff.
Brett, thank you so much for coming on. That's it for today's CEO Deep Dive. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our next CEO interview. I'm Kevin Stewart. See you next time.